The late 1800s and the early 1900s was a time of unsettling reform for American society. One of the most significant social reforms of this period was the women's suffrage movement. Women from all over America challenged their local and national governments for the same rights as men and for the right to vote. The suffrage movement came to a head in 1920 when Congress passed the 19th Amendment, giving American women the right to vote. Also during this turbulent time, another major phenomenon was spreading across America like wildfire. Silent films have become a major cultural phenomenon, creating a crazed fan culture that centered on young women. While the only connection between the women's suffrage movement and the silent film era seems to be their shared time period, silent films actually played a major role in the debate of women's suffrage in America, and in influencing the public's opinion on the suffrage movement. It, in fact, marks the first time a tool of mass media, film, became the chosen battleground for a political debate. Let's take a quick look at the history behind silent films and women. In the 1910s, people began migrating to the city looking for work. Women needed to adapt from a traditional farm life to an agrarian economy, and by the 1930s, women represented 21.9% of the labor force. Although women made up a good part of this labor force, they were compartmentalized into employment reserved only for women. While working these pink-collar jobs, women only averaged 55 cents for every dollar made by men. Only averaged 55 cents for every dollar made by men. As women slowly made their way into the workforce, silent films were also making a name for itself in the entertainment industry, as it became an important and influential component in American culture. By the end of the silent movie era, over 90 million people went to the movies weekly, and the industry was worth $1.5 billion. The majority of directors and producers alike were males, and actors also made a higher salary than their female counterparts. The screens were therefore dominated by female characters that were fashioned by men. As such, actresses were locked into three main roles: the virgin, the vamp, and later on the flapper. These female screen types projected and reflected the image of women that was accepted by society at that time. The virgin. The virgin archetype reflected the old Victorian ideologies that were still present during the early 1900s. The heroine was a sheltered, innocent girl on the verge of womanhood. As you can see, this character was pure, good, and chaste. As long as the Victorian woman was confined to the sanctity of the home, then she was believed to be safe from the evils of the world. The films that featured the virgin shared one common plot: a young and innocent girl out into the cruel world where her chastity is threatened. The common plot embodied the typical happy ending formula: a virtuous heroine in distress, plus her rescuing hero, minus the lustful villain, equals the happy ending. The happy ending formula was necessary to draw attention to the virgin as a helpless victim and her dependence upon superior male strength for resolution of her dilemma. In 1922, the cinematic version of Dracula, Nosferatu, can be analyzed for its portrayal of the virgin. Nina, the passive and sheltered wife of the main protagonist Jonathan, is threatened by the evil vampire. The movie begins with Jonathan getting ready for work while Nina plays with a cat. Nina looks like a woman but seems to possess the innocence of a child. The house separates Nina from the outside world. The inside of the home looks civilized, while the outdoor looks wild and unkept. Before going to work, Jonathan ventures into the wild to pick a flower for his wife. This scene can infer that a man can venture outside into the wild, while a woman's place is at home where it is safe and civilized. At work, Jonathan finds out that he has to go on a business trip. Before he departs, he brings Nina to their friend's house so they can watch over her while he is gone. On his business trip, Jonathan stays with his client, Nosferatu, and soon finds out that Nosferatu is a vampire. On one unfortunate evening, Nosferatu sees the picture of Nina. The moment the villain sees this picture, the audience immediately knows that Nina is in danger. After imprisoning Jonathan, Nosferatu leaves to find Nina. On the other side of the continent, Nina starts having nightmares and goes on dangerous sleepwalking adventures. The odd behavior starts when Nina is introduced to the outside world and is then exposed to its evil influence. Throughout the movie, Nina grows weaker because Nosferatu has control over her dreams. After a long trip, Nosferatu arrives in town and brings with him the Black Plague, killing the townspeople. Jonathan manages to escape and reach his wife before Nosferatu. At the arrival of her husband, Nina exclaims, "Jonathan, thank God you are safe. Now I feel that I too have been saved." Her rescuing hero has finally arrived to save her. However, at the end of the movie, Nina reads from a book. Only a woman can break his frightful spell, a woman pure in heart, who will offer her blood to Nosferatu and will keep the vampire by her side until the cock has crowed. Jonathan would not be able to save her from Nosferatu. Nina would need to sacrifice herself to kill the villain. Her virtue, innocence, and purity would save everyone. Nina's character epitomizes Victorian ideals of femininity. The Vamp. The role of the vamp was to counterbalance the image of womanhood created by the virgin. The vamp was a mixture of sensuality and destructiveness. She was a seductive tease, the kind of woman who enjoyed conquering the hearts of married men and leading them astray. The vamps were symbols of the moral polarity of the masculine world, while the wife represented the ethical and social order of marriage and family. There was also a strong relationship between the vamp and shadowed chaos, destruction, and death that occurred when a man gave into instinct. The Flapper. By the end of the First World War, the image of woman drastically changed. The transition in feminine ideals from sentimental heroine to rebellious flapper was quite significant, in that both were a reflection of the moral climate of an era. The war changed the role of women in America and in turn also influenced the characters in cinema. Because of the shortage of labor during the war, women started working in jobs traditionally only held by men. The war opened up a wider range of occupations to female workers and hastened the collapse of traditional women's employment, particularly domestic service. Post-war, men were used to women who were more independent and who had survived hardship. The innocent child woman who was passive and without resources gradually disappeared from the silver screen and was replaced by the new woman, also known as the flapper. Contrary to the virgin, the flapper was out in the world working and having fun. Clara Bow was famous for her role as a flapper. Her characters were a cross between a tomboy and a temptress. She played the roles of confident women. As a flapper, Bow possessed the cuteness of a good girl, the desires of a bad girl. As a reflection of women's involvement during the war, women's fashion and behavior also changed. The female characters now looked boyish and acted mannish. Because of her manly ways, the flapper was more accessible to men. The film industry was successful in portraying the changes of societal ideas of sexuality and femininity because they were deceitful in its version of the working girl. First, the films always showed women in glamorized employments, such as sales clerks, but failed to show women working in the factories, which at the time, a large portion of working women were factory workers. Second, the silent film heroine was considered modern because she supported herself through work, but she was still a victim of the Cinderella syndrome. Arguably, the flapper could be considered modern because of her independence and liberal sexual discourse. However, just like the Virgin, she was waiting for her own Prince Charming to rescue her. She just had a different method.